and welcome back to the Touchline Talk Show. Thank you so much for tuning in. Be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of my content. It is MLS season preview time. Gonna have a couple different parts of this segment of the show. First, running through call to power rankings, if you will, my top five teams in each conference. Then looking at the biggest storylines and biggest questions that are going to kind of define this season, and finishing off with everybody's favorite conversation about the new playoff format. So starting in the Eastern Conference, I'm going to go from 5 to 1. Number 5, I have the New York Red Bulls. The story with the Red Bulls will be, as it always is, really good team from top to bottom, lots of really good players. They are not MLS Cup contenders until they find that star, until they find that big-time goal scorer. Dante Van Zer is coming as a designated player after scoring double-digit goals in Belgium. Dante Van Zer can be that star that takes the Red Bulls from good to great. Even though they lost Aaron Long, the rest of the pieces are there. This team has an awfully lot of really good players. They don't have enough when it comes to playoff time to hang in there with the firepower of these other teams that are ahead of them in these rankings, and the NYCFCs of the world. There's a reason why it's been a lot of one and done in the playoffs for the Red Bulls. They're just good, not great. But this edition of Van Zier gives you the difference maker that they haven't had, in theory, assuming this works, and there's no reason to believe it won't. He needs to deliver, and I'll get to that. I'm going to save that for kind of the storylines. Lewis Morgan had a great season last year. Lewis Morgan can't be your best attacking player if you're trying to get to the upper echelon of the Eastern Conference. Now he's not. I still need to see this work for me to put them any higher than 5th, and quite frankly, there are just 4 teams I like a lot better. But when you are looking at kind of these middle tier teams, the Red Bulls are closer to the top tier of the East for me than kind of than the middle. They're getting closer to being legitimate MLS Cup contenders. This might be the season. This might work even better than I think. But they certainly, based on the roster, based on the impact Van Zier can have, deserve a spot in the top 5. Number 4 is the Columbus Crew. There are 2 teams I'm exceptionally high on this season, probably higher than most people, and one of them is the Crew. Christian Ramirez comes in. Cucho Hernandez, you get a full season. Lucas Alaron is still there. Wilfred Nancy, Coach of the Year finalist, is your coach. Wilfred Nancy turned a Montreal team with some nice pieces, an Ismail Kone that nobody had ever heard of, Jordy Mihailovic, who, good player, nobody considered an MVP candidate until he was playing like one at the beginning of last season, into the second best team in the Eastern Conference. This roster is way better. Part of this is I have always loved this crew roster, particularly with Cucho Hernandez in it. And part of this is my faith in Wilfred Nancy. That midfield is still really good, led by Zelarayan. Yes, you've lost some pieces, your Derek Etienne, your Jonathan Mensahs. I get that. I couldn't put them higher than this because of last season. It was just inexplicable, their inability to hold on to leads. But they made the right choice by trying to stick with the roster and believe in what they had built while getting a fresh voice in there and just one of the best coaches in the league, Wilfred Nancy. I 100% believe this is going to work. If the Crew aren't a top 4 seed in the East, to me this season is a disappointment. There are 4 teams, and then the Red Bulls are the best of everybody else. I really feel that strongly about the Crew. Number 3, and this might be even my hotter take, is Toronto. Last season was a disaster. They couldn't defend. They were better, but not good enough once the Italian DPs came in. So part of this is, yes, you get Federico Bernardeschi and Lorenzo Insigne from the beginning of the season. That is a terrifying thought for every other team in this league. Because they were good. They weren't just kind of getting their feet wet and understanding how MLS works. They were looking magical at times. Now, it wasn't enough. It's not like they were the best team in the league the second half of the season, just ran out of time. They got themselves back into position to make the playoffs and then threw it away again. That has to be part of this equation. The bigger reason, though, that I am so high on this team, Bob Bradley is doing everything he can to fix these defensive issues. 2 new center backs, including Matt Hedges, who is just a very solid MLS veteran who knows how to have success in this league and knows what it takes to defend well in this league. Plus, one of the best goalkeepers in the league in Sean Johnson. And Bob Bradley brought his old friend Adama Diomande back as well. So you now have a guy who was scoring goals for LAFC flanked by 2 of the best 10 players in the league in Bernardeschi and Insigne. I also love this midfield. I'm a huge Mark Anthony K guy. Jonathan Osorio has been really good. There is much better balance to this team. My hesitation of why I can't put them higher than third is 2 reasons. One, I still need to see this actually work because to me they have the best roster on paper in the Eastern Conference. I have no problem saying that. I'm also somebody who believes that roster and talent doesn't necessarily equate to best team. There's a difference between a best roster and a best team. Because there's no doubt who the best team in the East is. We'll get to them in a little bit. And I do think this is going to work. I think they're going to be right back up there. I would not be shocked at all if they're in the Supporters' Shield race. I'm on board with this. But also, they have tried and failed different iterations of this before. And it wasn't like everything was perfect once they got Bernardeschi and Insigne in last summer. So, you get an injury, you get some injuries at the center back position. They're not very deep. Sean Johnson gets hurt. It just doesn't work for whatever reason. There are still a lot of things that can go wrong. So I have more faith in the 2 teams ahead of them, even though I am all in on this roster, and to me, this is just a way more complete team than the one even at the end of last season that Insigne and Bernardeschi eventually kind of inherited and took over. And one of those teams is FC Cincinnati. I'm certainly not alone in this. There are obvious reasons to be very high on this team. Matt Miazga made a huge difference. You get him for a full season. That is point number 1 in terms of why this team can take the jump from a playoff team to MLS Cup contender. And you also brought in Santiago Arias to support that backline even more. And I'm also kind of, to continue that conversation about Toronto, I am giving FC Cincinnati the tiebreaker when it comes to benefit of the doubt comparing these 2 teams. Because they can score goals just as well as Toronto can with that front 3. Their big win of the offseason was just keeping this group together and then building on it. They didn't need a bazillion more pieces. They needed to just fix the defense. And a lot of that happened once they got their summer additions in, specifically Miazga. Now you have a full season with the team that looked awfully good at the end of last season. And then the other part of this is, from a power rankings, from a standing standpoint, the 3 teams I've listed so far are a Red Bulls team that we still don't know definitively has the star that they need to go break into the upper tier of the Eastern Conference, a Columbus Crew team that didn't even make the playoffs last season, and on paper, from a roster standpoint, arguably got worse, or at least kind of was equal with the additions and the subtractions. A Toronto team that was atrocious last season. There just aren't a lot of known quantities in the Eastern Conference. And so Cincinnati is a known quantity. One of the best attacking trios, one of the best attacks in the league. They're going to score boatloads of goals. The question will be, do they have enough defensively to actually go the distance in the playoffs and do more than lose in the first round? But on paper, the pieces are there now. It's not just kind of by default that they're here. There's a very logical explanation as to why they're going to be significantly better defensively this season. They showed you last season what they are building. I expect them to build on it even further. This is the turning point. You are no longer happy to get in the playoffs. I'm going to save that a little bit for a little bit later as well. But Cincinnati, number 2. And number 1, it's the Philadelphia Union. Philadelphia Union arguably had the best season in the history of this league. I will forever go to bat for that, even though they came away with 0 trophies. I don't care. Look at the goal difference. The fact that, if the goal difference was the tiebreaker, they have a supporters shield and they're playing MLS Cup at home. Look at the fact that they were winning MLS Cup in LA until, the very last moments. And again, you look at the rest of this league, or the rest of this conference, I should say. There's just nobody, if I'm the Union, that scares me from a rankings perspective. And oh, by the way, they bring back all 11 starters, including Kai Wagner, who I have said and will say again here, I have no clue how this guy is still on this team. Why somebody in Europe, specifically Leeds United, didn't want him is beyond me. So you lost Corey Burke, your kind of super sub extra goal scorer, but they added depth at every single level within in-league additions, which I really like. They're deeper in midfield. Jack McGuinn's going to be even better this season. Quinn Sullivan's going to get more minutes. Everybody else, generally, outside of Cincinnati, got worse or is a team that's trying to get better from a bad spot like a Toronto. And the Union got slightly better from being arguably the best team in the league. So, yeah, I did not have to think too hard about that one. On to the Western Conference. I've got Austin at number 5. The departure of Ruben Gabrielson is a big deal that should not get glossed over. And so kind of the comings and goings make me hesitant to believe they're going to be significantly, that they're improved a great deal from last season. Which, I mean, they were great last season. It's not like they need to improve all that much. And you did bring in, Giassi Zardes and Will Bruin to address this hole at striker. So maybe I think they will be slightly better, that they have a little bit better roster. And in theory, they have fixed they've addressed what they need to address. It's not that there's a hole in this roster at this moment. It's just that you need some guys who haven't been in this situation to produce for you. You need Giassi Zardes to be one of your primary goal scorers. Certainly capable of it. He's been doing his entire MLS career. But it actually needs to happen in order for this team to take the next step and to kind of pick up where they left off last season. A lot of this, though, is not really about my questions about Austin as much as it is the teams ahead of them. It's kind of similar to the New York Red Bulls. They had to be on this list. I just couldn't get to a place where I put them any higher than 5. Number 4 is the LA Galaxy. Ricky Puig played 9 regular season games. They lost 1 of them. That's my rationale. Again, every piece is there. Would you wish they had a little bit more from the winger position? Sure. It's not like they have the best roster in the league, but they were phenomenal with Ricky Puig. He is that good. He's that much of a difference maker. They've got enough around him. The reason they're 4th is I need to see them actually establish themselves as one of the best teams in the West. Because they've done this before. And you look at the squad on paper and you go, yeah, they should be really good. Look at all those names. And then they're struggling to make the playoffs. And they had some ups and downs last season. I would argue, wasn't what it should have been. but you come out of it feeling really good about your position heading into this season. It's just, when was the last time that the Galaxy were actually competing for a championship rather than just trying to make the playoffs and trying to win the offseason, the headlines, all of that kind of stuff? I need to see it before I start putting them at spot number 2 or something. Number 3 is Sporting Kansas City. This is the other team I am exceptionally high on. They had 2 designated players who didn't play a minute last season. The first half of the season was a train wreck. They brought in Willie Agata and Eric Tommy mid-season. Both of them were sensational. It was just very quiet and under the radar because they were so bad before they got there. There was no chance this team was making the playoffs, even though they were much better the second half of the season. If they can just get healthy and stay healthy, this is a better version of the 2021 team that was right there at the top of the Western Conference. You've got 2 goal scorers, really 3, because I wasn't even counting Johnny Russell in that, with Russell, Polito, Agata, and Daniel Shalhoub. Just particularly in attack, but from top to bottom. I love this roster. Again, got to stay healthy, got to get healthy. Make sure that your DPs, who missed the entirety of last season, get back into the swing of things and are able to be contributing members to this team. But if nothing else, maybe they don't come out of the gates and maybe they don't end up finishing 3rd. But you get a clean slate and you get the team you ended last season with at the very least. And that team is a playoff team. At full strength, Sporting Kansas City is much more than that. We're just going to have to see if they can actually reach the levels that I believe they can. But I'm sticking with Peter Vermes. They have weird seasons sometimes, but they always seem to bounce back and be right there up at the top of the Western Conference, and I expect the exact same thing to happen again. Number 2 is the Seattle Sounders. I still believe that was the best Sounders roster ever put together last season. I don't care that they didn't make the playoffs. Part of that was the CONCACAF Champions League. Part of that was the fact that they lost João Paulo in the CONCACAF Champions League. Part of that was it was just strange, and strange things happen in MLS sometimes. All I know heading into 2023, A, they're not missing the playoffs again. B, this is still one of the best rosters in the league, particularly with João Paulo, who's now back and working his way kind of into game shape and had a Club World Cup to sort of get his feet wet. This is still Brian Spencer, and this is a team without the extra games this season. That's a formula if we're getting right back to the top of the West. Now, the Sounders also do that Sounders thing where they don't deliver in the regular season the way that they're supposed to, which is why I have them second. I don't see them winning the Supporters' Shield. But on the list of teams you don't want to play in the postseason, they're going to be right near that top of that list like they normally are. I'm not worried about last season, and the other part of this is it was still a success. You trade a playoff berth for a CONCACAF Champions League for being the first MLS team to win that competition every day of the week. Every day of the week. They should have been able to do both. They weren't. But this is a team now that has a point to prove and is going to be giving much more focus to MLS because there is no CONCACAF Champions League to focus on. They will be looking like the Sounders again. And number 1, unsurprisingly, is LAFC. Last season, what they did, what Steve Cherundolo did, they deserved this spot. I was not going to take it from them. And also, I will acknowledge, right, my second and third teams didn't even make the playoffs. Similar to the Union, there's some, in the East, there's some work to do for anybody to get close to catching them. Because it was Austin last season. and it was FC Dallas. Who would be my sixth team? I will say that. So, assuming somebody is just going to top LAFC is unfair. What I will say, not enough can be made about the departure of Christian Arango for this team. He was scoring a goal basically every other game. And yes, Dennis Bouanga popped up at a big moment. Gareth Bale obviously popped up at a massive moment. Carlos Vela was good last season. Carlos Vela is also a year older now, and is probably not going to be starting every game. This team is not loaded with all of these attacking weapons the way they were last season. And yes, Stipiuk is 20 years old and one of the best young players in the world. One of the most promising talents, not just in North America, but in the world. Is he coming in to replace Christian Arango? Is this eventually going to be Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang? Because I got hesitations about that one too. Is Bouanga going to become the 15 to 20 goal guy? Maybe. They still have the best roster in the West on paper. I can't take that away from them. And yeah, you added Aaron Long to it. That helps as well. They're great from top to bottom, just like they were last season. But they are not the same behemoth in terms of, my goodness, they don't even need Gareth Bale to be good. If he starts scoring goals, that's an added bonus. Because Arango's scoring every other game. Here comes Bouanga that they added in the middle of last season. Carlos Vela is still doing his thing. Poor Mahalo Opoku can't even get on the field. Or he certainly can't get starts anymore. And he was phenomenal the first half of the season. Maybe he's the guy that, maybe it's Bouanga gives you 10 to 15, Opoku gives you 10 to 15. Maybe that's how this works. But you just took one of the best goal scorers in this league, and there is no like-for-like replacement for him. That is a major concern for me. Not enough. Simultaneously a major concern, and this is all relative to LAFC, right? It's not enough of a concern for me to drop from the top spot. I just wouldn't be stunned if this season looks much different than last season, where for most of the season, it was, my goodness, they're just better than everybody else. My opinion on that changed by the end, but you still can't argue with, they won a Supporters' Shield, they won MLS Cup. I don't see them repeating at that level in terms of what they did and just the way the season played out and kind of the narrative surrounding them because of the pieces that they've lost, specifically just on the depth side of this. But you put 11 guys out there, they still match up with everybody in the league. Nobody would be surprised if they repeat. Nobody would be surprised if they won the Western Conference. They have the benefit of the doubt. They earned the number one spot, at least for now.